Okay, so let's look at what industry, consumer products. And the reason why I wanted to start with this one is because it's so important to understand the American DNA, which is really replicating across the globe. And the American way really hit an inflection point post-World War II, when the growth of marketing and branding, which dominated the consumer and even dominates the business-to-business segment, really took off. And what was happening at the time was we actually had a crisis. We had manufacturing capacity that was empty. We had factories that previously were making piano wires and cosmetics and had been converted to making bombs and fuses and things of that nature. And we were fighting the Red Scare, the communists. We had to have a strong America to really show how being American, being a consumer, was much better than being communist. And so the problem was people weren't buying. I think they were just happy to be home, happy to be with their families, happy to be away from the war. So we had a crisis, but we can't tell people to buy. So we used a classic solution. Create a crisis and become the solution to that crisis. But the idea is make sure people don't know that you're doing that. So advertising was born, modern advertising. The idea being, create a crisis, show people, without these cars, without these clothes, without this makeup, you're not good enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not handsome enough, you're not cool enough. That's a crisis. And it's very powerful because humans are very susceptible to this. So we started advertising cosmetics and clothes and cars, making people feel really bad, bringing them down to this level, and then coming up with a solution, which is the products that we sell. Very effective strategy. So there are some other factors that were really important in contributing to this. One is TV and the movies really reinforced that. Not just advertising, but showing that in everyday people's lives. You're not beautiful enough or handsome enough or good enough unless you look like these people on TV. Getting people's DNA changed. Remember, we had to show the American way was successful to compete with the communists. And then branding went to a different level because the idea is, I'm not going to advertise and have you buy a product from my competitors. I'm going to want you to buy my product. Branding was an absolute requirement for this. So you could get a return on your investment in your advertising. So branding really evolved. Again, it's the focus on perception. Remember coffee beans. My grandfather had two coffee beans, the premium and regular. They were the same beans. It's perception. Any good hairstylist will tell you that all hairsprays are basically the same. It's the same formula. But there's a wide price range. So we started evolving branding into segmenting the market between those who could afford more and those who could afford less, mostly in labeling and things of that nature. We started creating more brands to grab more shelf space. So really we started focusing on creating demand, dividing up the customers. It wasn't about the product as much as it was the customers. Now, in the United States at the time, the 50s, the 40s, 50s, and 60s, we didn't have a lot of enemies to worry about. So we really focused on our consumer products. So we were focused on brands. We started to identify ourselves with brands and slogans. And so the marketing departments are very much isolated from the product departments. And we talked about this before, where you don't really want them mixing. Totally different DNA. The marketing people have to sell perception. And it's funny, I was renting a car and one of the slogans was, "We try harder." And I kind of chuckled because I know where that comes from. And I said to the guy, "How do you try harder? Do they train you in being better for the customer?" And he looked at me like I was crazy. And I kind of chuckled because I knew where that came from. I knew that that messaging was completely detached from reality. And that's where we live. That's how things are in this country. We got to really understand that it's natural to try to fight it because it doesn't seem to make sense, but it's the truth. And you got to really elevate yourself up to the level where you just accept that and understand that that's the way things are. And the thing is, it happens naturally. Again, we talked about leverage. Don't fight the river. It happens naturally. Customers feel good. The retailers have lower risks with brands. The manufacturers have lower risks. They have better return on investment. And so the reason why this is important to understand is because you have to really focus your mindset and understanding that in the world that we live in, perception absolutely rules. You may think it's ridiculous, but it's a fact. And it doesn't matter what industry it is. It doesn't matter if it's lipstick, cologne, or something like environmental technologies.